have a gym on site.
I'm going to go ahead and call our meeting to order and declare that we have a quorum of 7 trustees. Item C, consideration, discussion, and possible action related to a management oversight workshop for the CSISD Human Resources Department. Mr. Martindale.
Thank you, Mr. Nugent. As per policy BAA local, the district will provide oversight opportunities to the board throughout the course of each school year. We have 6 different major systems we provide oversight meetings for. If you recall, the last one was in October. We have Mr. Hector Silva with us with transportation. Today is human resources, and we have Ms. Stormy Hickman, our Director of Talent Management, and Dr. Nkrumah Dixon, Director of Employee Engagement, here to present for us our HR oversight meeting this afternoon. And just to let everyone know, they have both been fully vaccinated. And in addition to this, 3 feet, in addition to this, they know that the conclusion of our meeting today is scheduled for 1 p.m. Okay.
Thank you very much, President Nugent, Mr. Martindale. Thank you to the board for letting us be here today to present and share quite a bit about human resources. And so our goal today is to really provide an oversight, as Mr. Martindale explained. My name is Nkrumah Dixon. I'm the Director of Employee Engagement.
We're going to pass it right. I'm Stormy Hickman. I'm the Director of Talent Management.
And together we are the directors for the Human Resource Department, as Mr. Martindale discussed. Today is, with all our major focus for our oversight is to really talk about the overview of our HR department. We're going to also discuss many of the processes and procedures that we take part in. We're going to discuss our performance metrics and then celebrate and talk about our big wins and the continued work that we see ourselves continue to focus on for CSISD and for the betterment of our school district. So, and just quickly to really go over the CRS definition, as many of you already know, from the Center for Reform of School Systems, the policies and processes used by a school board to ensure the integrity and performance of the district's major business and operational systems. And so that is the goal. That is why we are here. As Mr. Martindale introduced also, there are the departments that will present to you. And so we just wanted to provide that this is our turn, and we are excited to really share what we do basically on a daily basis.
All right, good morning. Just as a beginning overview for the presentation we had today, we wanted to talk to you about our role really as human capital management. So in 2019, whenever I came over into the Human Resources Office, there was a reorganization that took place that made us sort of 2 separate but combined departments in human resources. And the reason for that is to create this focus on what we can do to really support our district as a whole. So we put this graphic here to sort of help you see that, yes, compliance is of utmost importance. That's something that we are committed to every single day. But also we want to make sure our processes are efficient so that we are allowing our campuses and our principals and our teachers to go and spend their time certainly supporting students. We want our all staff members, all employees in College Station ISD to feel supported and also connected, not only on their own campuses, but at a district level. And so as we walk through the presentation today, you'll see some of the ways that we focus on these 4 areas. So I alluded to the divisions in human resources, and Nkrumah talked to you about that a little bit already. So we wanted to give you sort of an outline of what that looks like. So the talent management side, which you see here in white, is the side of the department that really I head up, and it includes Linda von Rosenberg, who is a human resources specialist. She also serves as the administrative assistant to both Dr. Dixon and I. Lindy Haney is our lead position management specialist. She actually just is moving into that position. We had a longtime employee who retired recently, so Lindy is moving over into that position. That job primarily does the hiring for our professional staff. And then we have a position management specialist, which is currently a vacancy, who does most of the hiring for our auxiliary, paraprofessional, and temporary staff. And then we have Erin Evans, who serves as our receptionist there in the office, but also manages things like verifications of employment and other items that may come across her desk. On the talent management side, we primarily are in the hiring business. And so we handle recruitment and onboarding, transfers and changes with employees. We manage the position manager. So we keep up with where the positions are allocated and the status of those positions. We manage certifications to make sure not only that people are appropriately certified, but that they maintain those certifications appropriately. We track expirations and that sort of thing. We issue employee contracts and letters of reasonable assurance. We call those LORAs. That is for our non-contracted employees. They get a LORA in May of every year that says, we want to make sure you're coming back in August. So we have some commitment from them to return the following year. We manage some compliance things on our side as well, including we review the compensation plan, manage student teachers, job descriptions, performance and evaluations, and some employee investigations. So we'll talk more about some of those items as we go throughout the presentation.
Yes, as alluded, Stormy talked about the division. So I'm the Director of Employee Engagement. And so our focus, or my focus, is specifically how do we support the employee when they are on board? What are the things that we can provide to them in order to ensure, obviously, they have a positive experience, but also that we are taking care of their needs. And those needs first fall into the health insurance, the dental, vision, all of the type of insurance and supplemental benefits that we can provide. Ann Cashaw, who is our our employee benefits coordinator. She is basically the point person or the point of contact for all employees, especially when we are enrolling in August, but also whenever we get a new employee throughout the system, we also go through the enrollment process. She's also a point of contact for our third-party administrators who provide assistance in managing many of our supplemental benefits. We also have risk management and leave, as I talked about. Ann Cashaw is a part, mainly helps and decides that. Leave includes FMLA, temporary disability leave, and the recent COVID leave, as it's stated, has also been part of our, which we will talk about a little later, has also been a part of our division. We focus on employee assistance. We focus on wellness. There are many things. We have workers' compensation. Denise Hernandez, who is our position management specialist, she works and helps with the workers' compensation, all of those claims, working with our third party. In addition, she helps with the onboarding of all of our substitutes, and that is an ongoing process, which we will discuss a little later. Cindy Yanez, our human resource associate, she was moved over to our department, or our side of the department, in order to really help with that COVID tracing. And that's been just a lovely job for her, which we'll talk about a little later. Also, records and retention management. We provide service records for employees. I'm also the Title IX coordinator, working with investigations specifically related to sexual harassment. Also take care of the employee handbook, make sure our board policies and our policies are up to date as provided by the legislator. And then also we work on the celebration of our employees, specifically with our employee awards and that end of the year celebration. And that is our team. And together we are working continuously to ensure the betterment of our employees from the start all the way until the exit process.
And Kruma, or really
yes,
for
sir.
Stormy, the vacancy in your area, that was within the last few weeks, and she moved
Yes.
out of state, correct? She moved out of state,
She retired.
retired.
Retired and moved out of state.
Okay.
5+ years, that is correct. So this is our team to give a better picture of who we are, in case you ever want to see us and around, but this is our team as we work together to ensure, as I said, a positive atmosphere for our employees.
All right, as we continue just with an overview of the Human Resources Office, we went through fall semester, spring semester, and summer, and different times of year, what is the focus of what we're doing over in our department. So in the fall semester, we are obviously excuse me, continuing to onboard as many substitutes as possible so that we can have good coverage for our teachers. We complete and participate in a salary study with TASB every year, work on student teacher placements, and then really that last bullet is a big one, the hiring of auxiliary, paraprofessional, and temporary staff. We hire those staff members all year long. That would be transportation employees, bus drivers, custodians, sometimes instructional paraprofessionals throughout the year, kids club. Lots of hiring happens with those types of employees throughout the course of the year. It's not necessarily limited to mostly summer. In the spring, you can see that's a really busy time for us where we are working through service awards and retirement recognition. We process separations. So as employees make decisions to move on at the end of the school year, we start getting those resignations really sometimes as early as February. And so we start processing through those. And we begin our staffing for the following year. That's looking at demographic projections, enrollment numbers, and all that sort of stuff so that we can plan for staffing for the coming school year. We manage those internal transfers and work a lot on our compensation plan. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the course of the presentation, but that compensation plan is something the board approves each summer. Work on that begins much earlier than when you see it. So we start on that about January, February as well. Contracts and letters of reasonable assurance go out in the spring. We plan for the following year's work calendars, and also a lot of recruiting is happening right now. Then in the summer, we hire lots of folks. Everybody getting ready to start in August. We want to make sure they have everything done and are ready to go. So we do a lot of that over the summer. Continued recruiting for positions that are still available, orienting our new hires to the district, and also making sure that everyone is appropriately enrolled in benefits according to their choice.
And so we wanted to also provide many of the policies that we must follow. And so we just wanted to give a quick summary so you can see exactly these are the policies that we follow, that we ensure our employees are aware, especially, unfortunately, if they violate any of these policies. But also, this gives us guidance in terms of deciding specific action steps that we need to do or changes that we have to do that guide us throughout the year and guide us through the department. So these are basically summed up many of the policies that the legislator provides that go through TASB that we follow accordingly. So we just wanted to provide a quick summary of that information. In addition, we wanted to also showcase a summary of this is who we serve. All right, these are the individuals and the quantitative or who they are and the amount of individuals or who they are in their respective departments. We did not include substitutes, which falls at about 1,000 throughout the year. Kids Club and temporary employees are not included towards that bottom. So those numbers are also magnified, and those individuals also come through our office for onboarding and for whatever needs that they may have. But this is, in a lot of ways, CSISD, and this is who we, in a lot of ways, want to make sure they have a positive experience in our district.
This next slide just has a breakdown for you of the demographics of our teachers. This is something that was included in the last Oversight Management Workshop, and so we thought that was relevant to include here again today, just to give you an idea of that breakdown of our teaching staff and let you know that that is something that we do pull information on, that we recognize that representation matters, and we want to make sure that that is something that we're looking at as well. This slide represents for you our teacher turnover ratio over the last 4 years. The first bar that you see in each year is the CSISD turnover rate. So you can see in 16-17 that was 12.7%, and then you can proceed down the slide. That darker bar is the state teacher turnover rate. And so we've included that here just to show the comparison for you. You can see that our turnover rate has been really pretty steady over the last 3 years and has remained below the state average turnover rate as well. It's important to also note on this slide that teacher turnover includes those teachers who move into other positions in the district. So if a teacher moves into a counseling position or perhaps an assistant principal position, then we have had turnover in the teacher area, but they may have moved somewhere else in the district.
So that quick question, that 14.8% for this year, that's with COVID.
Yeah, so that's for the 1920 school year, yes, and it would include anything with COVID as well.
Awesome.
One more clarification.
Sure.
So when you say it doesn't count teachers moving to another position, but if a teacher remains a teacher just with maybe a different school or different job?
We would not include
They're
that
not.
as our turnover. Yeah, thanks for asking. Any other questions about this before we move on? Okay. So that ends sort of like this big overview of the Human Resources Department in our office. So now we're going to walk through processes and procedures, and we're going to try to do that sort of chronologically. So we'll start from the beginning before someone is an employee and walk all the way through what happens when a person is employed with us. So first, I want to just kind of give you a picture of the electronic processes that we use. Starting over with applicant tracking, that is our system that we use to post jobs, and that's where people apply. So principals and hiring supervisors go into applicant tracking. They request that a job is posted. That's posted through our office. People apply for the position, and when they want to recommend someone, they do that through applicant tracking, and then it comes back into our office. Then the person, the new employee, would move over into records, and that's where we maintain all of our employment files for our employees, and it generates a file for them in records where we can begin to collect the information that we need for new employees. Perform is where we maintain our evaluations, and so electronic evaluations are entered and signatures are obtained through that system. And then we've also included e-finance here. That is primarily our financial system, but because we are doing hiring and onboarding of employees, we do enter information into that system regarding compensation. So we work very closely with the business office in the e-finance entry as well. All of those programs are with PowerSchool. So it's been a benefit to us that we have one company that those programs work together with. And you'll see a little bit later on, they're actually working together better than they have in the past. So we're excited about that. Okay, recruiting. So we are in a whole new recruiting world in the last year or so. We are doing recruiting like we have never done before. So previously, we would go to job fairs, and you would go to a university and set up a booth and talk to the people who walked past. But last spring, whenever the world turned upside down, that changed. So right now, we are doing virtual recruiting. So we did that last spring, last fall, and again this spring. We have a lot of upcoming job fairs. The universities are using various platforms for that. I've listed a couple of them here, Brazen and Handshake. Handshake seems to be the most popular one that we see, but we have had to become fluent in the use of these various platforms because they work in different ways. So sometimes we have chat boxes where we're typing chats to each candidate. Sometimes we have video where we have 10-minute appointments with candidates where we speak to them about positions. There are lots of different ways that we interact in these virtual recruiting platforms. I will say there have been some great benefits to this. Probably the one that has benefited us the most is that these universities have been sending us lists of their qualified candidates in their certification area. So just last Friday, I went through the list of candidates from Texas State University, and I sorted by everybody who's going to be bilingual certified, and I sent them an email and invited them to my virtual booth for the job fair that we have tomorrow. So it allows us to target candidates based on what our needs are. So we normally have bilingual need, and so we started there. So that's been really helpful. It's not necessarily hoping that the right person walks past your booth, but more of an able to solicit people to come and meet with us. Obviously, there's decreased costs because we're not traveling. We are simply paying the cost for the job fair. Additionally, it is a decreased cost in our time. So if we were going to a job fair in the Rio Grande Valley, that would take a couple of days away from work at some point. And we can really now do that job fair over the course of 2 or 3 hours. And so that's been really productive for us as well. I love personally the record of the interactions. So in those cases where we have little chat boxes, I can save my chat boxes and go back and review the interactions that I had with those candidates and remember like, oh, there was someone who had some great experience. Let me make sure it's this person and see what we can do to maybe get that name out to a principal who might be looking for that type of position. Last fall, we had 10 virtual recruiting sessions, and we have 10 scheduled for this spring. The other thing that we're really trying to focus on, both last spring and now with our recruiting, is reaching out to campus principals to say, what do you think you're going to need? Because they may know of possible resignations that are coming that we haven't received yet, or no, I always have a hard time finding this particular position, so that whenever we're going to these job fairs, we can target our recruitment to those places where we may have potential openings. This is just a quick list of the places where we have recruited this fall and this spring. I'd like to point out some of these, such as the UT RGV and University of Houston Victoria, are places where we can recruit bilingual candidates. We have to really branch out in order to find those folks. Normally, we would also have Prairie View A&M on here, which is a historically Black college and university. They are handling their recruiting a little bit differently this year by not having a job fair. They're actually holding an education forum. I will say overall about virtual recruiting, I don't know that we are seeing as many candidates as we would see walking past a physical booth in an on-site job fair. However, I do feel like we are more targeted in our recruiting with the virtual platforms, just because of the information that we have up front and the way that we're able to really seek out candidates in positions where we think we might have a need. So it was a learning curve, but overall, I think it's been good for us. So once we've recruited, now we need to hire them. So we have developed processes that allow us to get good documentation, to have good accountability for our employee records. When we post a position, it has a job description attached always. We can't post a position without one. And then those once we hire for those positions, the evaluations are then connected to the job description. So we make sure we have good alignment and consistency. And then we have created forms that flow through HR to serve as documentation for our processes. So you can see the little graphic at the bottom. The supervisor puts in a job posting request, they make a recommendation for hire, we create a record and go through that hiring process. I love this slide because it exhibits how hard our staff works. And so I want you to know how hard our staff works, because they work so hard. When we hire a new employee, there are a lot of steps and a lot of things involved in that. It's not really like you hire someone and they come to work the next day. There are a lot of other pieces involved. So starting from the top, we do have the Do Not Hire Registry and fingerprinting. We make sure all of our employees are fingerprinted and background checked, which Dr. Dixon will talk a little bit more about in just a moment. But I wanted to hire that Do Not Hire Registry as well. That came out of House Bill 3, and it flags anybody who should not be employed in a school district, including non-certified personnel. So previously, we could look at a person's certificate. Now we can not only look at that, but we can check this Do Not Hire Registry. It will also indicate if a person is under investigation for something, so that we can be aware of that. We check that when a person is hired, and then I do a monthly upload of every employee we have to Do Not Hire, just as a second verification step. So that's been an interesting new process that we have that just gives us more confidence in keeping our students safe. We verify background checks and certifications. We collect all the paperwork, I-9 documents, W-2s, direct deposit, all the different things that you might need, verification of minimum requirements and certifications. And then we do some work with salary administration and equity and pay. So we have to decide how much a new employee is going to make. With teachers, that's easier because we have that salary schedule where it says it's matched to years of experience. With other employees, that's sometimes a more complex process because we need documentation of their previous work so that we can award compensation based on their experience. We want to make sure we have documentation of that. And we also look at comparable salaries of our current employees. So we don't want to bring in a new employee with comparable experience of a current employee without looking to make sure that we're being equitable with the people who have already worked here and been here for some time and loyal to our district. And then finally, we make sure that our new employees get compliance training as well.
Can I ask a question on the new hire? I mean,
Sure.
the do not hire registry.
Yes,
What's our percent like hit rate on that?
0.
Oh, really?
Well, because we do background checks and fingerprinting before we hire candidates, I think that does a lot of, we're sort of making some decisions about that before they are hired, which is ultimately the goal, that we wouldn't get so far into the process.
Okay. Okay, so that happens after.
Yeah, well,
After
it's
the
sort of
background
both.
check.
So
Okay.
they get a background check when they apply, which Dr. Dixon will talk about in just a moment. And then we do the fingerprinting process, and that would flag for us if someone was on do not hire if they were new to fingerprinting. And then again, like, just for my own personal reason, because I want to be really confident about this, we do that upload monthly just to make sure there's not any new
Sure.
information out there or something like that. But so far, we've not had anyone that we had to terminate because they came up on the do not hire registry.
Okay. Okay, and is there a cost to the do not hire registry?
No, it's through TEA and SBEC, so we just upload to the educator certification system.
Okay, thank you.
Can you go back one more?
Can I follow up on the do not hire real quickly? I was also just wondering, anecdotally, I would think that if people are aware of it,
Right.
I mean, they wouldn't even be
Hopefully.
applying, right? Because they don't want to show up on that list.
You would be surprised.
Yeah, I was going to say, you'd be surprised.
It is public. It is also a public registry. So, you can, as a community member, you could you could type a person's name in, just like a certificate, and see if something comes up.
Go back one more.
Thanks.
I want to speak to this one quite a bit. Or maybe position management is coming down
It's
the
coming,
road a little
yeah.
bit. Because there's been a tremendous amount of work done on that the last several years. And I have tipped my hat to Stormy and Kruma and Ms. Perry, because they've really taken the ball across the goal line on this. Position management is something I think has been a 2-3 year process. And it's kind of captured here, but I know Stormy will speak to it more specifically, but about ensuring the fact that before we post a position, that we actually have a position to post and we can tie it to a resignation. So we're not get postings of positions that we think are coming, but that they actually exist.
Right.
And it helps us manage payroll, matching positions to campuses, the staffing decisions associated to enrollment that you mentioned as well. But our process is much more formal now, and it's been a long time meshing human resources and business records together to ensure that it's happening and we're getting right budget codes and all those types of things. So, and again, I know you're going to speak to it some more, but even though that's a pretty little graphic, that represents a tremendous number of years of a lot of work to really align our system.
I get it. I'll talk about it in a few minutes, and I'll get excited because it has it's one of those things that we've accomplished so much in that area. So we do make sure that we have an available position before we post a position. And sometimes it's as simple as calling the principal and making sure that their resignation was uploaded into records, that the teacher's resignation was uploaded and processed. Because as you all know, May in schools is busy, and they may have a resignation sitting on their desk that hasn't yet been communicated to us because they've just been busy. And so we have that check in place. Like, you want us to post the position, go ahead and send me that resignation over. So that's been a great, we've made a lot of strides in that area. Oh.
Yeah, right here. So as discussed, when an applicant decides to fill out our application, we start really the process to really go through their background and really check to see if there are any arrests, check their background to make sure that obviously we can hire this individual. And so we use basically a 3-tier system kind of checks and balances. In more ways than one is a standard in Texas schools or ISDs, but we wanted to take some time just to share what that process looks like. Our third party, JD Palantine, we use their services. They use a national database. It's more of a credit. Their database analyzes background from that standpoint. Once if an individual has a hit or an arrest, depending on their criteria, which usually they have a 7-year window where they can report, they cannot report after certain things, then they will let us know, and that will trigger to our database, hey, this particular person has a hit. At that point, none of the hiring supervisors can see their application. So that basically falls on us, falls on myself to analyze their application to see, well, what's going on? What is the exact crime? Did they alert or inform us on their application that they do have a past arrest record. An individual also can, I don't want to say get past that portion, but the other safety net that we have is the fingerprinting process. So I don't know. The fingerprinting process. And so basically after an individual is hired, they will have to get their fingerprints. 2009, Texas law change where every educator has to have their fingerprints, compiles that database, and that really searches through the FBI database and makes sure that we have that. In addition, we subscribe, what we call it, to their fingerprints also, and that uses the DPS database. DPS obtains their information from a lot of the counties, which is probably the most accurate to see exactly if something has happened, and that's in the state of Texas. And so that three-tier system is in more ways how we ensure individuals are obviously hireable, but also are very honest, and we keep that in terms of them being transparent. We did place on the slide the amount of applicants that have gone through the JD system, and so this is basically what we see every year, give or take. Obviously, there's a little drop at 2019-20, but 2020, it looks like and our big season is in the summer when we will get an increase of applicants and going through that. If an individual does work for us and they do have an arrest, that is also notified through the system. That's where we get through the DPS system, because once again, it follows through the counties and it'll alert there. Oftentimes it's pretty instantaneous, so somebody has a great weekend, and so we should get that information Monday or Tuesday, real fast. And we handle that very fast. And that's something that we pretty much tackle. It doesn't happen too often, but we would definitely wanted to let you know the kind of the three-tier system in terms of how we ensure safety, obviously for our students primarily, but also for all of our employees also.
So, and Kruma, and you kind of touched on it, so the drop from 14,000 to 7, that's because it hasn't captured this summer, kind of the recruiting, screening process.
Correct.
Going into next school year,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Martindale, Dr. Dickens, does those numbers also include the volunteers?
Yes, sir.
That's probably accounts for about 3,500 of that number right there, because we're not screening near as many volunteers through that process. I think we have maybe 800 or so approved volunteers as of right now. And in previous years, that number gets up to around 4,500. So that's a big part of that. Sorry to interrupt y'all's conversation.
And the volunteer piece is associated with our COVID protocols.
Yes, sir.
And Kruma, is there a local adjudication process when you do get a hit? Like, do we have certain criteria in place to evaluate if a hit comes?
So we do. We analyze kind of a flow chart that we use to see what type of charge it is, misdemeanor, or when did it happen, exactly what it is. Allow the applicant or employee to share what happened. Want to give them their due process to see, and then evaluate if basically, will this person be able to lead and manage in that same position? Will this disrupt our learning environment? Will this harm kids, harm our employees? And so we look through that lens in terms of making that decision. On an applicant, it's more of, did they let us know that they have a background? That's one of the key criteria. And even with an employee, did you inform your supervisor? Did you let us at HR know that this has happened, or did we have to find out?
Right.
So all of those factors come into a decision, and then we pretty much communicate to cabinet, communicate to others, and make an informed decision.
Okay, thank you.
I also have a question on the background checks, just because in companies I've worked with, and you hear it in the news, that sometimes this is a bottleneck in a process. I don't know and I don't know if that is for y'all. It's also sometimes high cost. It sounds like we're doing a lot of background checks for the number of people we actually hire. I mean, the volunteer piece that explains a good chunk of them. But
Right.
I mean, so I guess one question is, how expensive is this?
It's 99 cents per person.
Okay, that's
per
not
person.
too bad.
Right.
Okay.
The hardest part is we have to, an applicant will apply for 8 jobs, 9 jobs. And so they will say we're like, no, it's just one person. same background, not 8 different backgrounds. So it's probably one of the combing things. It's not huge, but we want to make sure we're respecting taxpayer dollars.
And then I heard, I think wasn't it last year that Brian specifically they were so far behind on their fingerprinting that they said they were going to start doing that in-house, and I don't know if that happened or not. I was just wondering if does this anywhere in here, the backgrounds or the fingerprinting become a bottleneck?
Definitely
in the process?
The fingerprinting in August, it's always, and that's probably more state of Texas because everybody is trying to, that's when we experience our biggest problem. And our problem meaning if an individual, we're trying to hire these individuals, we're trying to hire so many substitutes, we're trying to hire paraprofessionals, and all of them basically have to get fingerprinted. We have one area in town behind Chili's, Indigo, and so that's the bottleneck. That's huge portion because an individual cannot work unless they've been fingerprinted. So I would say that'll probably be the biggest bottleneck. But other than that, we don't really have that problem, so to speak. May have a problem combing through the applicants with all the different hits, but even still, it's not even that problem.
It is the
not necessarily
fingerprinting. Did Brian actually, do you all know if they brought it in-house or?
I don't know.
So I read the same. They were planning on doing that. We did reach out to Identico about the possibility of us being able to do our own fingerprints, but because there's already a location here in College Station, then we were not moved forward in that process. So we send our folks over to Identico. The other great thing about that is once a person is employed in a school district, we just subscribe to their fingerprints. So we don't have to send everyone. We just have to send the people who have not yet been fingerprinted for being employed in a school district. So it's primarily in August that becomes a little complex. Scheduling anyway. Okay, the next thing, we've hired someone and we've background checked them and all that good stuff. We also wanted to talk here about our compensation plan. So I mentioned earlier that we do specifically calculate salaries and compensation for each person who comes on board with us. Part of that is working through the compensation plan that the board adopts, usually in the summer. So in usually about February, or late January, early February, in the last several years, we've began our work with TASB on the annual compensation plan. As part of that, throughout the whole course of the year, I keep a running list of, gosh, this doesn't seem just right, and maybe we want them to look at this particular job category or job type and look at market comps and that sort of thing and give us some advice in various areas. So then in the spring, we meet with them and share that information about questions and thoughts we have with them. And they look at our compensation plan and make recommendations for any applicable changes that would be appropriate to us. So that work is currently in place now to hopefully wrap up sometime around May or June. And then whenever we hire someone, we follow that compensation plan, but we also, as I spoke to before, want to make sure that we're being equitable with our current employees and that we're recognizing that we may have some particularly exceptional positions that are difficult to fill that we may need to make other concessions for salary-wise. The other piece of this that we look at is regarding stipends, equity in stipends, and also any extra duty pay. So that is relevant this year because of our virtual instruction. Early in the year, we made some decisions about who we would compensate additionally for their virtual work and really set some parameters so we could make sure we were being fair and equitable in that piece as well. So often compensation and decisions about compensation take place throughout the course of the year, not just when that compensation plan is developed in the summer. Quickly, I'll talk to you about evaluations. Really, the primary human resources functions are making sure that we have those and perform both so that we can verify that they've been completed and we can conduct some data analysis. You guys have recently heard about teacher incentive allotment, so that analysis and perform is going to be really important for our work with that. We have, over the years, worked to create additional evaluations digitally in Perform so that because these systems all talk to each other, when a digital evaluation is completed and performed, it's signed electronically by the various involved people. It then becomes part of that employee's record. And so all the information is contained in one place. And also we can report on when evaluations were last conducted so that we can support campuses in making sure that those are conducted at least annually for each employee. Employee records is the next little piece that I'll talk about. We've made such great progress in having digital records for everyone. In fact, there were a number of years where human resources office staff were scanning old paper files so that we could have them available electronically. In employee records, I put a little picture up here for you because if you think about the old paper folders that you might have with people's names on them, we still have little folders. They're just all digital at this point. So when you go into an employee's file, you can see all the various folders excuse me, and areas that they may have documentation or paperwork, so we can easily access anything we need to. That would include things like a personnel action request. So if a teacher moves from first grade to third grade the next year, we would have documentation of that. Any salary adjustments that we need to make. We send contracts and LORAs through records, so they're sent electronically. The employee signs electronically. It's filed in their file, so that's really accessible to us. The same with salary notifications. We do those each fall, where we send every employee a letter that says this is your salary for the current school year. They sign that electronically, and we maintain that file as well. The two most common things that and transcripts is probably the most common. Sometimes an employee will call and say, hey, I know I turned in my transcript to you when I started here 10 years ago. Can I get a copy of that? And so we have those files available electronically as well.
Stormy, on the salary notifications, how long have we been doing that? A couple of 3, 4?
How long have we done that?
The salary notification electronically?
We've done salary notifications for a number of years. We did them electronically for 2 years now.
Last 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. And we were doing the salary notification before they'd receive a paper copy in essence. And something I noticed, and y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but as we've just moved to the electronic notification, it seems as though people pay much more attention as opposed to getting a paper copy. And it's really let us clean up our system quite a bit. I've noticed through the course of time, even when I was CFO, that someone they're ready to retire and they start looking at their years of service and their salaries. A few of you have heard these conversations before. And, wait a minute. You know, I was actually supposed to make this, but this is what this says.
Right.
And it's things like that. Moving to this electronic process is really cleaning things up. So as you see this process, know that when you transition to that and move more and more stuff that way, there's a whole lot of cleanup going on behind the scenes. And she mentioned, we have paper copies of everything in the world over there and have spent time scanning that stuff in over the last several years.
Yes.
And to make things electronic to go so we can go find things. So this is one of those things, as we've been a small district and through the course of the last number of years and growing so much that our processes had to evolve. And this is one of them, and it's helped us become more efficient. And I can tell you there's been a tremendous amount of hard work by a lot of people to get us to this point.
It's really interesting because our newer employees, we onboarded them by having them fill out their paperwork and records. And so they know this is where I go to sign things and fill out paperwork and all that kind of stuff. It's our employees who've been existing, who were here when we had paper systems, who we've had to do some training with them about, you go in and sign your contract or whatever it might be. The other thing I love about those contracts and salary notifications specifically is that we I click a report and it shows me who signed it and who hasn't, and I can bulk remind everybody who still needs to sign it. So we can really quickly narrow down reminders and that sort of thing for people. We've also begun using that particular process in records for things like time and effort forms, because we know we've then maintained electronic documentation of them, and we can easily track who has signed and hasn't, and sort of maybe chase down the folks who need a little reminder. It's been really great. Okay, benefits.
So in continuing with an employee who has just been hired, the other aspect is to really offer them benefits and offer them our supplemental benefits in order to meet the needs of obviously their employee, but also their family. And so we go through a process to try and really offer as many of the options that we have to inform them. That's probably one of the biggest key things in terms of educating, especially a new employee, a new teacher, a new person coming into education, newly career starting, just graduated from college, I don't know what's going on, and taking the time to really explain some of the options. And these are the things that you can do. And this is one of the things that you want to start with now, because it will help you further on and really go through that process. So we really try and be as aggressive as possible in terms of the educational side. Hey, this is why this is important, and this is why we want to do that. And so we plug a lot of advertisement in the summer, and then throughout, as new employees come in, we want to try and give them as many opportunities to take advantage of what we have to offer. As many of you know, our CSISD, we offer a 4-tier system that's probably very unique in terms of the state of Texas, in terms of how we contribute to employees and their medical costs. CRS has fortunately changed a lot of what they added new features. A lot of it is a result of pressure that they were having from districts, and then also other districts using DOI to opt out and add on other medical supplement. But as a result of that, they've helped many districts. In addition, they moved over to Blue Cross Blue Shield, which definitely had a positive impact for many of our employees in terms of taking advantage of that and taking advantage of the medical benefits that we provide. And so that part has been very good. In addition, we definitely offer dental vision. We try and stay abreast in terms of how our employees are liking the particular options that we provide. Is this good for you and your family? Is it worth the money, so to speak, and things of that nature. And so, in fact, around this time is when we start the process to see if there's anything else our third party can provide and can change and do different to assist our employees. And so that's something that we really stay on our third party to try and maximize the benefit for our employees. The other aspect, the employee assistance program, that is something that I enjoy the challenge, and this is probably tip my hat off to Mrs. Perry about really, hey, let's try and really use this and push this out, because this is basically free mental health for our employees and free ability to allow them to use and really talk to someone, a licensed counselor, a licensed psychologist, and really help them. And every time we advertise, every time we give another push, we talk to our leaders, hey, or if you see something, send them our way. If there's something that doesn't seem right, if somebody's having a problem, send them our way. And every time, for the most part, an employee will, hey, I need to talk to somebody. I need to do something. And so mental health is big. It's one of the things that we really want to make sure we're using and trying to meet the need of our employees who may be going through difficult times. And then we continue to have annuity options. We like to try and give as many opportunities for our employees to learn about their financial health and the financial future that we can provide. And so we offer different third-party money managers to communicate. And so we just want to try and give a plethora of options for our employees to use. Here's just a quick breakdown of how many employees have decided to use our particular programs that we have. And so just wanted to share that graphic. We did have 521 employees. They did decline. Most of those already have previous insurance, or they're using the lovely institution that's right up the street, and they're using those insurance because of a spouse or something from that, or their parents and things of that nature. And so this is just a breakdown of what our employees, or percentage of employees, and what they've decided to use. Okay, also in our department, what we call VOEs, verification of employment, and that is something that is pretty big, especially in the summer. VOEs, basically, a lot of time employees need that information in order to, and we provided that information, but that is one thing that constantly comes through our department. And so we wanted just to share that goes through. Aaron Evans is one who probably handles majority of these during I guess COVID break. I don't know what we want to call last year, the extended spring break. During that time, we had the opportunity to really tackle a lot of VOEs, and we could not wait for Aaron to get back. I'll tell you that much. And so it's definitely quite a bit of individuals call just to get more information. It can be as easy as someone calling, hey, does this person work here? And we get a little more information about who they are asking. And then we provide the information all the way to filling out a complete form for that. But there's quite a few of those. Next, we have our leaves of absences, and this is where Ann Cashaw really puts forth and goes forward and is really our point of contact. And this is also one of the key things because there's so many things that happen in an individual's life. And so we want to educate and inform our employees that they have options. And those options we in CSISD has provided by the Fair Labor Act that we can help individuals who are going through specific needs. And so obviously FMLA is the big one, but we also have temporary disability. We also have hardship leave that was brought upon into our policy about 3 years ago that we use. These are all unpaid leave. And so where basically we provide just an opportunity where we want to communicate to the employees that talk to us, let's see what's going on, let's see what we can do to help. Let's see what we can do, what options we have in order to assist you through this time. Because oftentimes, when there's an addition or a birth, those are the celebrations. But the other ones, they get that much more complicated. And an employee oftentimes is not necessarily in the best state of mind to make decisions. So our goal is to first try and calm, let them know that you have options, okay? And we are here to help. And we want to make sure that we help you during these times. Workers' compensation, as explained also, that is something that all organizations have to provide. And Denise Hernandez is our go-to person, is our point of contact. Our third-party administrators are the ones that really help us go through this. Our goal in CSISD, in which we have to train our nurses and our first responders meaning an individual that will be there, the first person, when an injury occurs, that they have to communicate and fill out the particular form immediately in order for it to be processed. There is a violation or there could be a fine if we don't do that correctly. And so that's one of the things, and you'll see in our metrics that we want to make sure that we do, where all injuries must be set forth and sent in 3 days. And so we have to do that in order for it to be accurate, and there is not an additional fine. And so these are some of the costs that we've had to incur as a result of that. 2020 looks pretty good right now, but we'll probably shouldn't say that. All right. Service records. Service records, definitely one of the key components in the summer that really move forward. An individual that is leaving a school district will always want their service record, because if they're going to another school district, this in a lot of ways is how if they're a teacher, their step is calculated, or even if they are just an employee in education, this proves that they have either particular leave, hey, I still have leave left from my other district, or I've worked at another district, so I should get credit for the amount of years. And so it's a big mad rush in the summertime because everybody wants to get that final calculation, things of that nature, but it does happen all throughout the year where individuals leave and we have to provide that. Linda Von Rosenberg, who is secretary for both of us, administrative assistant for both of us, is the one who really quarterbacks this and really takes the time to process this. We've moved to where an individual can fill out the form digitally on our website, and then Linda will get that information and process. We do have per policy 30 days, but Linda usually gets it done within 7 to 10 days, which is a real benefit to the next employee. Sometimes it's the next day if it's not the busy time, but usually she really wants to get that off her plate. Service awards, big key thing is celebrating of our employees. And so we want to make sure that we do that, and we do that effectively, and we really take the time to say thank you for all of the work that our employees have provided, the years of service, and then those celebrations, which is a good plug note right now in case you don't have May 13th on your calendar. Please make sure you have that on your calendar, 6 p.m. All right, subtle hint, subtle hint. And so, I guess not so subtle, but definitely our Employee of the Year, where we recognize our Teachers of the Year. Last year we had to go digital. Once again, another challenge from our chief to say how we can make sure we can make this happen. And I think it turned out pretty good last year. And so we definitely want to make sure we are always celebrating our employees. Our 5 to 10 year, I think that's on the next slide, service awards, we give that to our campuses, and they have their own celebration with those particular employees that are there on the campuses that have been specifically within the school year or within CSISD. And so who've been on a campus, or within CSISD. And so those are just some numbers in terms of how that is processed as we're moving forward. But those celebrations are provided at the campus level. And we basically purchase the awards and send that to them. And once again, that Linda von Rosenberg has a big hand in quarterbacking and ensuring the organization of that.
And Kramer, you go back to that one.
Yes, sir.
And if you don't, one more. And you may not, this is not a fair question probably at this point in time. I'm looking at retirees. Do y'all have any idea, and granted it's only the end of March, 1st of April, any idea how we're tracking at this point in time? I know, not a fair question.
I wish I could give an estimate. I know some big names that are retiring.
I'm just like, is that number?
I know, right? I know.
Because I receive them as well. And right now, I haven't noticed, it hasn't struck me as like, whoa.
I would say that. It's not,
Okay.
It's not as many, but you know.
It is still early.
It's still
I'm
early.
just curious, and I see the 31 to 35, at the end of 20 last year, I can understand a bit of an increase.
Yes, sir.
Considering the circumstances. I'm curious what this year would look like. Now, in addition to that, the number of folks that we had 19, 20 employed versus 16, 17 is significantly different as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I would guess the 35 percentage-wise might be
the same.
comparable to the 26.
Yes, sir.
Because we opened a couple schools in there.
And also there's usually a push between second week of April and end of May. So people decide to retire.
Well, and what happens is, because we'll send out contracts.
Right.
And that's typically when folks will start communicating.
Either, right. And some people wait until May, hey, you know what? I'm retired. Okay, congratulations. We celebrate them in a good, healthy way. Substitutes. Our that function, substitutes, is definitely one of probably the daily management in terms of meeting the needs and ensuring a bit of safety. And so our numbers continue to fluctuate. We try and really get a good push. The best average is about 1,000. If we can get about 1,000 a year, that's pretty healthy. I think we probably need to raise that to 1,200 maybe, just to get that much more effective, just because majority of the substitutes, 30%, only work 5 days or less, right? So that helps a little bit, but that doesn't help a lot. You want to definitely get, and there's a variety of reasons. Substitute teaching is flexible by nature, and that's one of the things advertised. But the more we can have, and so just as a FYI, the onboarding process is very similar, but it's just basically on steroids. It's more intense because it's that many more individuals coming in at one time. We offer quite a few sessions throughout the year. We've changed to virtual this year, and so that it's been pretty good because we were able to do more. We learned that we were able to do more. In the beginning, in the fall, we were beating down bushes to try and get people to substitute. And so obviously all of that was related to COVID in terms of what that looks like. But in that process, we also go through compliance training that we have to go through. I added the increase or the compensation that we provide our substitutes that was changed 2 2 years ago, and that has helped quite a bit. And so that part, in terms of us strategizing, giving certified teachers more has helped. And then also when we talk about long-term, when a particular person stays in a particular job, and increase their compensation, that has helped also in terms of retaining substitutes. And so there are many individuals who started their CSISD career as a substitute. So it's definitely one of the, I won't say backdoor, but one of the best ways to really showcase who you are for kids.
So how has this year been with substitutes and
This
COVID?
year, it was terrible in the fall. It was terrible. But then all of a sudden, from December to February, I don't know what happened, but we started getting a ton of applications. People wanted to work, and that really helped us, especially in February, because October and February are our worst months in terms of just everything, in terms of meeting the needs of the campus with substitutes. But December, January, there were a ton of applicants, and so it's about where we're almost hovering where we normally are. Now it's just a matter of getting people to work. Go from there.
And Kruma, on that, what percentage, or roughly, do you think of our substitutes are actually A&M students?
When we calculated 2 years ago, it's 50%.
About
50%. So
You
it
think-
may have adjusted, give or take, plus or minus 5%, but 50% were related to Texas A&M. Okay. All right, and so finally, one of the things, this is definitely the definition of as other duties as assigned, was COVID. And so that came through the HR office, and so it was something to remember in terms of what we needed to do as an office, what we needed to do as a district in order to meet the needs. And so contact tracing was huge from that standpoint. We had to communicate and talk to those employees while we were learning the documentation of what that looks like in terms of sending information, allowing them to obtain paid leave, emergency paid leave. And so that was provided initially by the federal government. And then fortunately, CSISD decided to remain and keep that intact as we continue to deal with all of the issues related to COVID and the pandemic. And so I think that's a hats off to the individuals in here who decided to keep that because starting January, it ended for the most part from the federal government, and we decided to keep that. So we were basically stayed with our plan of action. Communication regarding the leave, talking to each employee, letting them know exactly what happens. Our nurses take care of our students and their families, and we take care of our employee side in our office. And then the care and concern in terms of in the beginning, I mean, it was a lot in terms of communicating to those employees because there was so much fear, so much unknown. Now it's a little more routine in terms of understanding, hey, what do I need, and things of that nature. And it's not the quantity is not as much, thank goodness. And then there's a level of accuracy for payroll because we are talking about paid leave, and then the continual learning and changes. In fact, we just had another change last week where now when an individual is vaccinated, we have to take that factor into account should they be considered a close contact. And then finally, there were 860 employees and counting have been impacted with COVID. And so that number is basically individuals who've had symptoms, who've been positive, who've been close contact, who have their child, the daycare closed and things of that nature. So that's just all of the individuals who have had some type of impact that we've had to communicate with and talk to and really basically walk through the process of how can we help you during this time. So I just wanted to share that information.
To clarify that number, do you think could a person be double counted in there? Like if they had an issue,
for sure.
a question, okay, so
Yes, definitely.
So it's not individual employees?
Necessarily.
It's a cumulative
It's
number?
cumulative of, and so that individual may have been positive, and then they may have been a close contact, and then their child. I mean, we've had individuals, like we have one right now who's first the daycare closed, and then the person she lived, so she was a close contact, her mom, and now she has it. So it's just kind of a snowball, so different things.
I know one family that can account for 3 of those. With that being said, however, when I have that conversation with that person and try to, well, X, Y, and Z, no, Dr. Dixon said so-and-so, he's already told me, and he's checked back with him at this day. So I stood corrected. So you're doing a wonderful job,
Thank
Dr.
you, sir.
Dixon, of
Appreciate that.
communicating.
Thank you.
So it trumped what I had to say in my house, so.
Okay, we're going to move into just some more employee relations type tasks that we help with in the HR office. These are a little bit more difficult to quantify with numbers, but we do work closely with supervisors and employees across the district. On any HR related issues, we do provide mediation if needed for personnel related issues. If something needs to be investigated, then we step in and assist with that as well. A lot of just like taking phone calls and saying, hey, can you talk this out with me? Let's talk about the best way that we can move forward in certain situations. We are part of the employee grievance process, and then Dr. Dixon is our Title IX coordinator for the district as well. So we manage all the various employee relations tasks that are listed here, and really just serve as support anytime that supervisors need a listening ear or and some advice or someone to talk things out with. We do quite a lot of that. Did you want to add anything on Title IX or?
Probably the only thing is you are probably aware, just with Title IX is the federal government changed the standard of how their proceedings in a lot of ways. And so just the documentation that is needed, but also communicating with our lawyer about particular circumstances is just one of the factors that probably is new to when we talk about Title IX and any occurrences that may occur.
Next,
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt again on that last one. Just the one to provide procedures and forms to document disciplinary actions. So that's not student related, or could it be? Or
Right. No, it is employee related. So if there is an incident that occurs that needs to be documented with an employee, we have some templates that principals can use, or other supervisors for that matter in the district. We also, as we're progressing through evaluation processes, if there are things that need to be addressed, then we assist principals with how they can address those situations and document them appropriately.
make sure we're following all the
Right.
policies and stuff. Thank you.
A lot of times it's in the form of templates because we want to make sure we have all the relevant factual information included anytime we're providing documentation. Okay, this is just a short summary of the human resources budget. As with every other area, I think, in the district, personnel is likely the largest expense. You can see for us, the next largest expense is in that contracted services. That includes subscriptions to our programs that we've talked about, like all those the frontline substitute system that we use, the Power School systems that we use for our electronic records, and also our background checks and fingerprints. So that's a really big chunk of expense for us. The other thing that I want to highlight here, our budget for awards is, our budget is $8,000. We generally spend more than that and have worked it out, like how we can make that happen within our human resources budget. But as the district has grown, that expense has grown as well, because we want to make sure we're providing the service year pins, and we have our award ceremony at the end of the year, and providing recognition for our retirees as well. So this is just a quick summary of our budget in the Human Resources Office.
So when we talk about our performance metrics, we wanted to provide, obviously, a summary. What measures do we in HR do we use to determine how well we are doing? Obviously, the development of the metrics and determine the performance targets. And then obviously the input on the metrics are there, the correct metrics, the performance targets, and the annual report on performance. The goal is to use in the measures of productivity, quality, customer satisfaction, timeliness, and safety. So these are the standards that we definitely are the categories that the lens that we use in terms of developing our metrics. In addition, we wanted to share our previous metrics, and we felt very confident about this information. Timeliness, a workers' compensation indemnity claim but also known as a DWIC-3 form, must be reported within 3 days. And so that's, I alluded to that earlier when we talk about workers' compensation in terms of this is what you can receive a fine for if this is not done correct. And we're at 100% with that. When we talk about productivity, increase the number of substitutes by 100 new substitutes. So each year, we've definitely had a core focus of always trying to increase the number of actual substitutes that are working in our school system. And a lot of times that involves recruiting. We've gone to A&M. They have a halftime or part-time employee fair that they use at the beginning of the school year, and we've always taken the time to go there and try and recruit. Productivity, increase the total number of substitutes who work 5 days or more. A part of that is with the compensation and trying to increase that to get them to use that. And then productivity also, when we talk about 20% increase in the number of dual language candidates applying in the candidate hiring pool.
So this previous metric of an increase in the number of dual language candidates, the data that we pulled, in some years we meet that 20%, in some years we did not. But what I found is we can have applicants that are not qualified applicants. And so even if lots and lots of people apply, if they're not certified, then we're counting them as applicants, but really they're not legitimate candidates for the position. So we have increased the number of dual language candidates in the 2 years that I've been here in the office, not by a lot, but we do have people applying for those positions, and we are targeting that in recruiting and job fairs. And then the last one listed there is about staff members developing competencies in 2 or more functions. We do have staff members who are cross-trained in various ways within our department. That is something we have made progress on in the past several years. So we looked at these previous metrics and had a lot of conversation about where we are with them and what we want to do going forward, what would be a good measure of our level of success in the Human Resources Department. And as a result, we are proposing some new metrics going forward so that the next time we review these, we have a little bit different take on the data that we would provide. So previously, there were a couple of metrics regarding substitutes. We summarize those into maintaining fill rates above 90%. Because ultimately, whether we increase by 50 substitutes or 200 substitutes, what we need to gauge is that fill rate. So we've adjusted that metric a little bit there. Our teacher turnover rate is something we certainly want to be mindful of. And so we've included that here. We want to continue to keep that rate under 15% and under the state average, which we have done historically, but also, we want to make sure that we're monitoring that as well. One of the previous metrics, and I'll skip back, the very last one was 3 staff members developing competencies in 2 or more functions, which was a great incremental step to what we're proposing now, which is that there are at least 2 HR staff capable of completing all tasks. So what we want to happen is if someone goes on vacation, then whatever that person does that needs to be completed during that week they're on vacation, someone else can do it. So that we're cross-trained in such a way that there isn't a backlog or a holdup whenever someone needs to be out or takes off for some reason. Or even during the course of the year, whenever we're hiring for spring semester Kids Club and there are lots and lots of Kids Club people to hire, that we have more than one person who can jump in and assist with that. And then finally, we've proposed self-evaluation of the department and a plan for targeted goals and really soliciting feedback from campuses and departments. So we would like to survey ultimately our customers, the people on campuses and in departments, to see what areas they feel like they're being supported and what areas we can provide additional support and set some goals associated with those, with that feedback. The next section we're going to talk about is big wins. I said, we have talked about this a lot. We should have something more sophisticated to call this section, but big wins was where we landed. So these are our big wins, okay? First of all, regarding processes, we've talked about some of these already. And Mr. Martindale brought up, we transitioned from being a smaller district to a larger district over the last, several years. And part of that becoming a larger district is really documenting our processes and making sure that we're communicating those processes appropriately. So we've done a lot of work with internal transfer processes and temporary workers where we have a documented guideline, we communicate that out to the relevant people, and we all have this common understanding of what our practices and procedures are for those particular areas. This year for internal transfer, it was, we have an infographic that we send out to campuses to share with staff. If I want to transfer, what do I do? Really trying to communicate that clearly so that we can all be on the same page. Virtual onboarding is something we were sort of forced into last summer where we needed to do we needed to onboard our employees without physical presence. The little picture that you see at the bottom is actually our welcome to CSISD video. So 2 years ago, we did a bus tour around the district where we took the new employees on a bus and we drove around and saw the campuses and all that kind of stuff. So we've actually done that digitally now, which has better air conditioning than being on the bus, I'll say that. So they can watch this video and learn more about the district and complete the rest of their onboarding activities as well. And then we have developed HR newsletters, 2 different newsletters. The first one listed there is about health and benefits. Dr. Dixon puts that together regularly and sends it out to all employees in the district with updates on whatever they may need to know about health and benefits, including that employee assistance program. That's a good way that we can get that information out. And then monthly, we collaborate on a newsletter to Success Team that just has updates on what's going on, evaluation deadlines that are coming up, recruiting events that are happening, just to give them information about ways that we can support them. So those are some big moves that we've made in those particular areas. This is where I start to get excited. I said I would get excited about these parts. So optimizing our HRIS system. So we talked about how we previously had a lot of paper, and now we're moving forward with doing things a lot more digitally, and how that allows us to have more accuracy and also efficiency in the way that we are completing our processes. All of our new hires are assigned an electronic checklist that then walks them through every step of everything they need to do before they can begin work. And then we are using that record system for communication. So we can get electronic signatures on documents. We're sending a notification of ready to work. So previously, a supervisor would hire a person and push the button, I want to hire them. And then there was not as much communication between okay, what happens now and when do I expect them to show up sort of thing. So now we're sending them a notification. This person is ready to work. They've completed everything they need to. You can expect them on whatever date. We're also completing personnel action requests. So anytime a supervisor needs to make a change, they can submit that via records. I cannot say enough about our staff working on this. This is a big move, right? Whenever you're used to having paper and you move to, you have to log in and see your task. It's a big move for us and also for our business office. The payroll department specifically has really had to be involved in moving to this process, but it has been phenomenal in our ability to track and follow up on just all the things that we do with new hires. So that's been a really big success for us. And then in February, it got better because our financial system began to sync with our HRS system. So whenever we hire someone in records, they're also created as a profile in eFinance so that we can begin to process their payroll. Previously, the HR staff was hand entering all the information from one system to the other, and now they're verifying that information. So that increases our accuracy and also our timeliness because they can, rather than hand typing every last detail, they can verify that it's correct based on the prior system and then move forward. So that's been really great. Mr. Martindale talked about position management systems. So 2 years ago at least, and maybe longer before that, Eric Wivak, who works in technology, actually began developing a position management system for our district where we could track positions. So as a principal years ago, I remember when I wanted to hire someone, I would say, so-and-so resigned, I want to hire for that job. So that's how we discussed positions, is who had them before. And that becomes a little more difficult whenever you have an organization of our size. And so Eric created the position management system, and then we worked to populate that. And so now every employee is connected in position management system to their job description, to where their position is located on the pay plan, and to their location. So you can see I included a little excerpt here of assignment codes. So for example, an elementary school counselor, the assignment is AP 0303, and then it has an additional designation of the campus location, and it allows us to track positions. So when someone resigns, we go into position manager and we mark that position as vacant, and when we get a new person in, we include them there so we can really easily see where our vacancies are. We have, at this point in the year, a vacant end of year designation, so we know who's going to be leaving at the end of May, and we have populated that with all of our district employees, not just campus employees, but also transportation, child nutrition, and facilities as well. That's been really helpful to us for lots of reasons. Anytime we talk about big wins, we also want to talk about continue to work. So we're not done. There's still other things that we're focused on and moving forward with. The first one on the list is our exit processes. We have, as I stated previously, done a lot of work with digitizing that process. What we don't have currently is good response in our exit data. So an exit survey, like why are people leaving the district and where are they going? We don't currently have a lot of people who fill that out. So we've talked through ways that we can refine that process so we can have an expectation that they complete that and also make it easy for them to do so that we get good data there. That's a process that we're working on next. I'm hopeful that we can have a lot of that updated before really May 1st so that we can begin collecting some better data before the end of this school year. We've made good progress there, so I'm really hopeful about that. We are also working on a human resources handbook. The goal is that when we hire a new employee in our office, they can come in and have documentation on how to do the data entry and what they need from employees and all that sort of information. We have completed PARs and really detailed procedures for our non-exempt staff. What we need to do next is write those procedures for exits and also for our exempt staff and hiring those folks and how that process needs to work. The next thing on the list is reconfiguring records access. So on a screen a while ago, I showed you where all the folders are, where we used to have paper folders and now we have these digital folders. Whenever we first adopted records, we rightfully so, and a good decision, really locked that down because you don't want to give people access to personnel records that they don't need, or a supervisor may not need access to all of the information about an employee. So that really is very limited in its access. But now that we have expanded its use, we've realized there are things that we can give access to that people can then go in and get themselves. So for example, the folder that contains a teacher's contracts, there's not a reason that the teacher should be able to just log in and open that folder and see their contracts from year to year. Currently, they have to call us for us to then like PDF it and send it to them. So we really need to reconfigure that access to make it even more efficient for employees to be able to access some of their own records as appropriate. We're also going through an update of job descriptions. Again, this is a function of growing so quickly. We want to make sure that we have updated job descriptions for all of our positions. Ones that have been filled more recently have been updated because we would update them before we post a position. However, if there's a position that the same person has been in for 15 years, it may not have been updated in that time. So we're going through a systematic process of updating those as well. And then you are all well aware of teacher incentive allotment. And so that is a big task that we are working on as well in the Human Resources Office.
As stated, while we are making progress, I definitely feel that we can be that much more intentional regarding the promotion of all the benefits that we do have that we can provide employees, especially when we're talking about our custodial employees, our child nutrition employees. What else can we do to make sure that they are taking full advantage of all of the resources that we have? And so when we talk about promoting, just really making sure we are touching every employee that comes into the system to really make sure, hey, we have this for you, and what can we do? And then continue the use of our digital systems for all of our core functions. Stormy alluded to it, that is the goal, to make sure we are very digital and everything is digitalized. I think we can also be that much more efficient on the employee engagement side. Although there are signatures that are needed when we talk about FMLA paperwork and things of that nature, but how can we push ourselves to make sure that whole entire process is that much more efficient? And I think together as a whole, that is part of the focus that we really want to work on as we're moving forward in our HR department. As many of you know, with the HR department, we are oftentimes the first individuals that an employee will see when they're coming into CSISD. So a lot of times our department, it's the first thing, first impression, and we take that serious. We want to make sure it's a very positive experience. But also, we're oftentimes the last individuals that a person will see, whether they're retiring or whether they're talking about a spouse that may have passed away or trying to get their life insurance and things of that nature. And we take that very serious, take that extremely serious, because we want to make sure not only that we're meeting their needs coming in, but that they are definitely benefiting from all that we have to do. Individuals love our school district. And so we want to capture that energy and continue that energy, promote that, but most importantly, obviously respect and make sure that they have a very positive experience. And so with that concludes our presentation, and we are definitely here to answer as many questions and get as many comments or thoughts that you have.
Stormy, I have a question about when you were talking about the different universities that we're targeting for recruiting, and you mentioned that Prairie View is doing something different. Could you elaborate on what they're doing, and are we participating in that?
So we just got an email about it on Friday, and I had wondered because we hadn't gotten information about their job fair yet, and it said they're doing an education forum where you can participate. It's virtual, I believe, where you just learn more about their students and their programs and what they have to offer. And we do plan on participating in that. I'll also say we got notification late Friday of another University of Texas San Antonio, who is offering an opportunity for you to cancel on their job fair because they're not having good response. So we are seeing some universities that are not having as many participants in their job fairs as they would like. On Handshake, which is the template, the forum that most people are using, you set up a schedule with 10-minute appointments that people sign up for. And sometimes we can log in and see that we have 30 appointments and only 10 of them have someone signed up for them. Other times, every single slot is taken. So that's why we've kind of added that concerted effort to reach out to people ahead of time to say, hey, we have some spots in our job fair. Come and see us. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure.
In regard to substitutes, that it seemed like a couple times you mentioned the number that substitute 5 days or less.
Yes, sir.
Is my initial gut reaction is, it seems like that's a lot of work for the employee to put in to qualify to substitute, and then they're only doing it 5 days or less. Is
Yes,
that just
sir.
kind of the nature of the beast, or is there something we can do to improve that, or?
It's more so the nature of the beast. I do believe the increase in the compensation did help that quite a bit. We did see a decrease in that particular percentage, so more individuals worked. We've also tried to increase the requirement, so we try and stress, hey, you have to work at least 7 days or else you will not be considered a CSISD substitute for the next year. So, I mean, it helps a little bit, but not necessarily. It's not the magic statement or the magic stick to really get them. So it is a portion of the beast. We did have to reduce that to 6 days minimum to try and at least increase that. And so it's constant trying to figure out the incentives to really increase that work.
Yeah. So that's not just a CSISD problem?
No,
It's pretty
no.
standard. Okay,
Right.
gotcha.
It's the nature of education. Yes, sir.
No, if you want an example, I'm a substitute in Bryan occasionally, but very occasionally. It's almost more a volunteer type thing. So yes, they bug me to substitute more often than I do.
Yes, ma'am.
And I will tell you, Mr. Mann, that while substitutes we're far from having that perfected, that I would put our fill rate and efforts up against anybody else's. It's a consistent opportunity throughout the state. And again, I appreciate Dr. Dixon because in particular, late fall, early spring, when we had Thanksgiving and COVID was really kind of increasing, and I would thankful sometimes, not other times, awake to a 6:30 text. Not awake, I'd already been awake. I was in my office and got a 6:30 a.m. text from Dr. Dixon saying, hey, this is how we're tracking today. Here's our campus that has the biggest issue, and we're working on it. So there was a period in time where, daily updates, and he'll work with the principals specifically, and if we have some folks show up at a campus, then maybe that particular position is not needing a sub after all, reallocating that to another campus. So there were definitely some rough days. I think he was a little rougher on himself with his response to that than needed, because it was rough on everyone. And I think we probably, again, plenty of room for growth. We're probably better off than most. And something, there were times as well, he'd tell me a particular campus, I'm like, hang on, did they not see this coming? Sometimes, unfortunately, you'll have employees put in extracurricular or co-curricular activities a day or two in advance, as opposed to a week much farther in advance to allow you to plan far accordingly. And so, sometimes there are those situations. But through the course of COVID this year, folks just kind of do what has to be done, and they have gotten it done. And again, not perfect, but better, I think, off than a vast majority.
And I think personally, I think you guys tracking the fill rate is, that's the end game, is we can have people filling those positions. So I think that certainly that makes sense to know that we're doing it right. But you did kind of allude also that I know this year we've had lots of other teachers having to cover, or people not doing as much training. I just wonder if our own employees have been covering more. I do have a little concern and wonder if next year, when are we going to get to be back to a normal situation, and be able, will we still then have a substitute issue? And I don't know if any of us know that yet. But.
Yes, good. I'd love to be able to answer that one for you, but I'm not sure. I can tell you, yes, again, through the course of this year, if we saw a particular days or a week coming up, because we'd watch this in advance and track things, Dr. Dixon, and then report to us. There were times where we said, okay, are we having this shortage? Is it self-imposed?
Right.
Because we have scheduled some type of district training or whatever the case may be. Do we need to cancel that to cover the classrooms? And we did that on several occasions. We obviously did not have as much professional development through the course of this year for a number of reasons: spacing, pulling people off campus, just a multitude of reasons. But there were times through the course of the year where we pulled back on some of those things to make sure that we weren't pulling people off campus and creating a substitute situation where we couldn't meet the need. Also, I would tell you, and there are times where I use secondary, for example. If they're short a substitute or two, then there'll be kind of an all-call, who can cover this period or that period, and so folks will come cover during their conference. 2 years ago, I believe this is the second or third year, we established a process where we compensate our employees for that. So they have 7 periods, maybe they work 6 of those 7. And what we do at this point in time, if at the secondary level, if once they have covered on 6 different occasions, single periods, then we compensate that employee as we would have paid a certified substitute. We have a mechanism in place at the elementary level as well. So we recognized that several years ago. Actually, that came up during a PAC meeting, I believe, and we put a process in place for these folks helping out on campus to, after X number of times, to compensate what we would have paid for a substitute, to at least try to recognize their efforts for helping.
One more thought, I was just doing the math on it. I mean, do school districts ever just hire more paraprofessionals and just as rolling substitutes around districts? Math-wise,
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Dixon, don't you just keep a certain number of folks queued up in the system on a daily basis?
We do, yeah. We
So-
allocate them to a particular campus if needed to. Really, yes,
We don't use them as paraprofessionals, but he keeps a certain number of substitutes allocated per day and builds them into ghost positions at a particular campus.
Right.
And has them, and he may have to reallocate. So there is kind of some of that strategy. So not necessarily hiring paraprofessionals, but he does kind of,
try and meet the demand, depending.
yeah,
especially if we see a lot
create
of
ghost
roles.
substitute needs to carry a certain amount each day regardless.
The other piece is we've learned, virtual orientation versus face-to-face, and how will we use that to increase the amount? So that's something that we're going to analyze and see how we can use this new feature that we've been forced to use. And so what will that mean for us in the future?
I have a question on the customer surveys, that new piece. Could you elaborate on that just a little bit and who's being surveyed and?
So as we talked about ongoing performance metrics, the question became like who we need to know from our campuses, principals, directors, if they are receiving what they need from the Human Resources Office.
Gotcha.
And if some of that is about efficiency. So is the time that it takes from when they want to hire a person to when the person can start something that they believe is reasonable? Also, do they know about the programs that we have available to them and to employees? Do they feel like we're communicating positively with them? So as we develop that type of survey to send out, those are the places that we would start. Also, as we've talked, kind of envision some open-ended information about what the perception is of what we could be doing to support campuses that maybe isn't on our radar yet.
Yeah.
So just some good conversation about, we feel like we've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas. And so we want to make sure that what we feel has been good progress is really creating an impact across the district.
I love that. I think that's so important. That's huge. I like seeing that that's incorporated as a performance metric because that's that accountability piece. And like you said, you can do all this great stuff, but A, if nobody knows about it, or B, it's not helpful, then.
Right.
So that's fantastic. I just want to say I love all of the improvements that you've made from digitizing everything. I share your giddiness on position management, just so you know. That is huge. That is huge, especially as we're growing and that we're keeping up with it. And really, this is more of a comment, from. And I encourage you might want to look at maybe doing new hire surveys too, and how their process was, because that can give you a lot of data and feedback.
Right.
But that's a huge differentiator in a recruiting process. I mean, I know we're a very well sought out district, but if it can be smooth and efficient, word gets around. And so I just want to hats off to you for all of the improvements, and I love where you're going as well. So thank you for all that you do. And is there anything that we can do more to support you as a board?
Is this the part where I go to that budget screen?
everybody seems to do that.
I hear you.
No, it's not, Dr. However, Ms. Strauss isn't here right now. She had to step out, so we should fire away. I mean, she's not here.
I will say we have the collaboration that happens within the central office staff that really works on things regarding hiring and compensation and exits and all that. We obviously have good cabinet support with whatever may come up, but also we work really closely with the business office. And sometimes over the years, it's a crazy idea. Like, what if instead of doing a paper copy of this, we did XYZ, and like having people who are willing to go with that and say, let's try it. And often if we make a change or an update, we'll track it. Like, okay, the next 20 people that come through, we're going to track step by step and make sure this is really functioning the way that we think it will function. But we can't do that just by ourselves. So there's a lot of great collaboration that goes on in all the different things that we do.
So Stormy said it nicely. So let me speak specific to over the last 3 years. I'm looking at Molly because Molly and I kind of went through this together. So there was time, and as things evolved and the district gets larger, some of our departments are working more in silos, and there wasn't enough work across departments for the common good. The work between human resources, the business office, technology, and their relationship and getting things done and understanding how a consensus is more efficient and everyone can benefit from has something that has really evolved, I will say, over the last 3 years in there. And that is what has allowed a lot of the processes that Stormy's speaking to really take shape. So I think that shift in mindset and that expectation has helped with that with the leaders of our directors in those prospective areas and just an overall expectation. So I would anticipate that continue to grow over time.
No, I ditto on so much of that. Obviously, as a process person, I love seeing all the focus that y'all have had in that area, not only going electronic on a lot of things and when possible and when it makes sense, but even just documenting, and training people and cross-training people. It's wonderful. And I also agree on the survey. That's the way at the end of the day to know that it's getting the results that you want. I was wondering if you thought about, I was just thinking another possible metric to know if you, again, we're having success with the hiring side of it. I mean, do you ever look at like an acceptance rate or and you may know will be somebody to add to this, Amanda, or your hires, how long they stay in the job, right? I think that's.
So that is a great point, to look at how long we maintain people that we hire. And it sort of goes back to some of what Mr. Ben said. A lot of work goes into hiring an employee, and so we want them to stay so that we're not repeating that work unnecessarily. We could speak to that anecdotally about like certain like we may have more custodial staff turnover. We may have more like particular areas of turnover than others, but as far as like really quantifying that is not something that we have done, but certainly that's something we could look at. Because if you get it right on the hiring end and we take care of everything that we need to at that point, then hopefully that minimizes that turnover over a short period of time.
Yeah, and obviously you're not responsible for all that but you can identify some trends. And also it is a judgment of whether you are getting the right person for the right positions. Yeah. And actually that turnover, so I wanted to make sure the numbers we looked at were teacher turnover.
Correct.
Specifically, okay. Mm-hmm. Is that, so on a yearly basis, what percentage of your hires are teachers? I mean, that kind of answer. That's what I was thinking. I was thinking like does it align with the percentage of teachers, of our employees being teachers, or?
So I would have to pull that specific data to speak to it. I would say we have a lot of employees in our auxiliary departments, custodial, child nutrition, transportation. And so like comparing those two things would be, it's a different, if they're not under contract. And so at-will employees versus contracted employees, it's certainly information that we could pull, though.
So
data
I
that we
assume
can
those have,
access.
you're saying the more turnover in the non-teacher.
Well, someone is less likely to leave as a teacher because we do have them under contract. So they would stay through May and then perhaps leave at the end of the year, but that ongoing throughout the year turnover is less than it would be if, let's say, if someone were in an auxiliary position and decided to move on to a different auxiliary position somewhere else. They could really do that at any point during the year without penalty, as opposed to someone under contract.
So, I mean, again, without seeing the number, you might be spending, for the number of positions, hiring twice as many
Right.
auxiliary employees as you are
Right.
teachers, right? So it's a big, it's all, I was trying to figure out where you're spending most of your
Right.
effort and work. All right. I like the welcome to CSISD video. That seems like a nice idea. And so I'm assuming that's employee focused, you were saying, right? But also maybe a nice thing for families as well, Chuck.
Chuck and Attican did a lot of work on that video, so and that's why it looks so good, because you get professionals to help you with it. So we have talked about what are some other ways that we could perhaps use that now that we have that as a resource.
Because I know families moving new to the community could also benefit from that kind of overview of our schools and in a.
Or even prospective families wanting to move to the town.
Oh, that's
Right.
true too. I think I have one more. Oh, I have two more questions. Sorry. Anybody else? When you're hiring teachers specifically, how does and you've described it a little bit, but how does the process between what you guys do and what a school does and the principal does, how does that work?
So currently we have candidate pools posted for a lot of positions that are more generic, let's say. So we have elementary teacher candidate pool. So anybody can apply to that. Any elementary campus can then go and look in that candidate pool should they have an opening and hire from that pool. That allows us to start collecting applications before we necessarily have a resignation in areas where we know we'll likely have some turnover. So we can begin collecting applications then. Once we post those jobs, then really it is left to the supervisors to vet those applications. So they would pull the applications, determine who they want to interview, conduct those interviews, and then recommend someone over to human resources. And I would say 90% of cases, as far as certifications and meeting general job requirements, it's pretty simple. Like, are you certified to teach third grade math? Then yes, you are, and we're done with that. Some areas, certainly in secondary, are a little bit more complicated. So they'll call and say, okay, I want to hire this person for this. This is their certification. Are we good? What do we need to do? So we work with them on that before they make that recommendation. We do talk with supervisors about recommending a candidate for hire, because once they get to our office, we're the people who make the offer. That allows us just to make sure every box is checked as far as their certifications have been verified, that we check and make sure that they have checked references and that everything has been taken care of in order to make that offer. Ultimately, the campuses make the decision about who they want to recommend to hire, because they know what they need in a particular position on their campus. They have the closest knowledge of that. Once they recommend to hire, we take care of all the paperwork that has to be turned in, the district level onboarding, but then campuses onboard to their campus specifically as well. Some of that happens in NTU, but we all know that there aren't a lot of people taking their whole summer off and not doing anything. Like, they're getting their new teachers in there and getting them a key and letting them start setting up their classroom and letting them meet people and go to meetings and that kind of thing.
You take a lot of the administrative piece of it off their hands, but the principals, and again, both you all have experience
Right,
with this.
yes.
They have to do.
The principal, they'll create the pool, or if it's a specific posting for a particular position at a particular location. But we started doing a pool several years ago as well, because it lets us get a head start on collecting potential candidates before we actually have a vacancy. And then when there is one, as Stormy mentioned, the principal can go directly to that pool and vet candidates for an interview. So everything's there ready for them. They go through the interview process at the campus level and then make the recommendation. After they submit the recommendation in the system, all logistics from that point forward are handled in human resources.
We actually have workflows built into those recommend to hire, where there are stops at several people in our office who verify various things. So we make sure we've checked everything before we contact them with an offer.
Awesome. My other thoughts, and this was thinking about this even before showing up today, I didn't know if we would see more on the compensation part. And Amy's left, but maybe this is more questions for her than y'all. You talked about the compensation plan a little bit, right? And I know we do the compensation comparison studies, but I just trying to, there still is, and I know we also gave more money to we upped our numbers this last year. There still is often that buzz sometimes with teachers, are we competitive with other districts? And I don't know, when is in our process is our next time to kind of look at some comparisons maybe, and maybe that's the way to ask it and have some of those discussions. Why do we have to hear from teachers that they can go to Magnolia and make more money? I'll put it bluntly, right?
There are varying rates on the teacher schedule relative to the region and the location and metropolitan areas. So the region 4, Magnolia obviously is closer to HISD, and region 4. Those salaries are higher because that's the market there. So over the course of the years, much of our schedule is reflected in the Region 6 area where our location is. DFW is going to have a higher starting schedule as well. That has been that way for as long as I can remember. Now, the question is what amount is enough? I suspect it's never enough. And then secondly is the variable of managing the budget in conjunction with that. I can tell you my philosophy on compensation is I want to compensate people as much as our budget can withstand. And as you all know, obviously there's a threshold in there of responsibility and what we have and what we don't have. Yeah, I can tell you 0 year starting year salaries relative to Houston and Dallas. There's a significant difference, and that is the market drives a great deal of that. I know that we have pushed on the 0 year the last couple of years, in addition to compensating everyone, but being very cognizant of that starting salary because it was lagging behind. And I think we started getting the studies from TASB probably about, I don't know, it's probably 4 years ago. I think it was my second or third year as CFO, and now that's an annual thing. And they run comparables to districts like us, and it just allows us, and they do it with teacher schedule, all of our pay grades, with our stipends and everything else. So we're always trying to move that direction. So we haven't got that information back from them. I suspect it'll be about next month. It's typically April. And then what we'll do is start looking at some financial runs from Amy, which will be even more challenging because it's a legislative year. And then you have to mesh the two. What can we afford? Well, we want to do everything we can afford, understanding that salaries are a reoccurring cost.
Of course. And obviously we all know that we love to pay our teachers as much as possible, but within the constraints of how much money we have to work with. Maybe for you guys then, as the hiring side of it and looking at the exits part of it, how is this an issue? How big of an issue is it?
So hopefully better collection of exit data will help us with that part of the question. Like, are people leaving to move to places where there is a higher salary? So we need to collect that data. As far as hiring is concerned, it's hard for me to make a judgment on that because our teacher salary schedule is posted on our website. And so my assumption is that someone would be aware of the teacher pay scale as they apply. So it's hard to judge who's not applying because of that compensation schedule. Most people, whenever they come in, are aware, I have 7 years experience, the chart says I'm gonna make this much. So I think that would be a little bit more difficult to collect, but we could certainly collect exit information and acknowledge whether or not salary is a factor in that.
I will tell you that, and Stormy, if I remember correctly, relative to our teacher compensation scale, our upper years are 100% or 101, 102% of the relative market typically. Where we struggle is down at the lesser years experience. So what occurs, Kimberly, where you see very high starting salaries are probably 0 to 5, 0 to 10 years, is through the course of time in the Region 4s and 13s and those different locations, what occurs is they front end load their salary schedule. So they get that 0 year really high, but the difference in your steps are more compact. So your 0 year teacher may, or whatever, I keep saying teachers, but you can apply this concept to any salary schedule. You can have a really high starting or 0 year experience, 1 or 2 year experience. However, your steps to 2, 3, 4, 5 are minimal. So I have seen that strategy incorporated. There's more spacing where 0 year or starting may be less competitive in some of those areas. Once you hit about the 10, 12 mid-range of the salary schedule, ours becomes more competitive because there's a little more spacing in those steps, if that makes sense. You can front end load and make 0 year teacher 60,000. And then year 5, it goes up $200 a year. There's ways to play that game if you so choose, but I would argue that at times it serves less purpose to your more experienced people.
No, and honestly, a couple of maybe anecdotal things. One is obviously we hear the teachers who say, yes, maybe I could go make some more money somewhere else, but I want to work here. And that's obviously one of the wonderful positives about our district. But I also think that some people think they could go make money somewhere else, maybe, and it's not necessarily more money somewhere else. It's not necessarily true, especially at those higher levels. So I appreciate that conversation.
And just to add on, from a medical standpoint, our 4-tier system is pretty unique. It's something that is not throughout the district. And I think analyzing from that standpoint, while it doesn't necessarily have impact as many employees, it does have a factor for some, right? In terms of what are we able to contribute versus this and versus that. And so I think that part is, obviously TRS is going to have to continue to help as we continue to manage through that. But that part is pretty unique from us.
And the younger person entering the system is less interested in the benefits and contributions, just something they're just not at that place. And so that is huge. Recently, Dr. Dixon did a survey as far Region 6 and the contributions of school districts. And they sent it out, and I'm like, they didn't include ours. Well, it's because ours is so much more complex than what anyone else does with the tiered system. When they're trying to report how much you contribute, well, you see, 350 or 400. Well, ours is tiered, depending on different variables. So I think that has an influence, and you touched on it as well. I will tell you this, and this is why I believe in cultivating leadership and empowering folks, developing them, and so on and so forth, because the cultural climate that exists within a particular department or on a campus, I would argue has as much influence as compensation at times. In the leadership of of those particular areas, and someone wanting to work at this campus with this leader or these people has a tremendous influence on folks as well.
No one else? All right. Thank you all so much. Just looking back to the last time we did this, I mean, just to think of the last 3 or 4 years, the evolution in y'all's department is astonishing. And thank you so much for your leadership. And I know everyone here, we appreciate our staffs so much, and y'all's department really is the hands and feet of that. And so thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your time today. And with that, we are adjourned.